All right, I'm gonna start now. Just a reminder, unless you're speaking, please remain muted so as to not interrupt anyone who might be speaking at the point in time. Okay? All right, so we're about to start. All right, welcome. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first community hangout. We're planning on doing these on a very regular basis, and we're really excited to hear from you today. My name is Jazan Billy, and I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. For those who do not know where that is, it's the southernmost island in the Caribbean, and it's just 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And that might give you some, more direction. And we're not part of Venezuela, we're just really close to them in many different ways. So that's where I'm from. And today we'll be hearing from our new editor in chief, Sebastian Rodriguez, and we'll also be hearing from Chris Wright, our managing director. And then I know quite a lot of you are as excited as I am to learn more tips about media research from Patricia Valerio, who is our media research manager. So before I pass over to Sebastian, I'd like to just do a quick game with you guys. And the name of this game, it's a little bit difficult. It might be a little bit difficult, but let's see how it goes, right? It's you have to tell us what your country's current emission target is, right? So I will start it off and then I will pass it on to somebody randomly. And that person can either tell us what their country's target is or just pass it on, right? So basically, for my twin island country, we're currently aiming for a reduction in overall cumulative emissions from three of our main emitting sectors. And those three sectors are power generation, transportation, and industrial sectors. And we're aiming to reduce by 15% by 2030 from business as usual. And that's our main emissions target. And I'm going to pass it on to, let's see, Marta. Marta, are you there? Okay, instead of just passing it on, does anybody want to tell us what their country's current emissions are? Current emissions goal? I feel like nobody's gonna say anything. I'm seeing some coming in the chat here. Bindu is saying India will.
Sorry, was that what you were asking? I wasn't quite clear, so that's why I typed it.
Yeah, Bindu, you can come online and tell us via audio what India's current pledges.
Yeah, so that's the plan. The plan is to reduce the carbon footprint by 33 to 35%. So that's by 2030. That was the 2005 levels. So yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bindu. Does anybody else want to share what their country's current emissions are?
Yeah. Yes, Zimbabwe.
Loretta.
Southern Africa. Okay, so we set to reduce by 33% by 2030 below the business as usual scenario, and also by 2063 we aimed at reducing up to 44%. but we have our revised version now. So I have to check now what has been the new commitment, but this has been the commitment so far.
Okay. Great. So that's from Zimbabwe. Anyone else?
Me.
Victor. Yes, Victor. Let's hear.
Mexico.
Victor from Mexico.
Hello.
Yes, Victor.
Hello.
We can
Good
hear
morning
you.
to everyone. Good morning to everyone. Well, Mexico is the first country in Latin America with the emissions of carbon dioxide. And unfortunately, my country does not have a plan. Our current president does not have a plan to reduce the emissions during the next 3 years.
Okay. Thank you, Victor, for sharing that. That's interesting.
As I said, it's been the first emissioner of
Yeah.
CO2 in Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, for sharing. All right. Well, if anybody else would like to share, please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Anthony from Nigeria. That is if you can hear
Hi,
me.
Anthony.
Okay. Our mission goal is to increase our renewable energy generation by 13% by 2030. Hello?
Yes, thank you so much, Anthony. All right, that's great. So thank you for those who were brave enough to share what their country's emissions targets are. And I'm gonna pass on now. You can continue to post that in the chat if you like. I'm gonna pass it on now to Sebastian. Now, Sebastian is our current editor-in-chief of our website. He's the guy who has been in contact with quite a lot of you, reviewing your pitches and so on. So I'm passing it on to Sebastian, who will take it away from here. Sebastian.
Thanks, This. And thanks to everyone that showed up. It's great seeing all of you here. Some of you I've already been in contact with. I've been reviewing all of your pitches if you sent one already. And yeah, it's great to see you all here. I know it's difficult when you're a journalist to make some time in your agenda. So we really appreciate you being here, and we hope that it will be helpful for you guys. I'm just gonna go ahead and share the presentation with you. Let's see if I can get this. So if you're joining our session today, you probably already know that we're launching a pitching initiative. I'm the one that's gonna be reviewing all of your pitches and giving you some feedback as well. So so in most cases, I know some of you already sent us some pitches, and we already even commissioned a few of them. So so you'll probably if you follow Climate Tracker in our socials or in our website, you'll probably start to see some stories published soon. So I wanted to start this by telling you guys a bit about Climate Tracker and what is it that we do and why we are launching a pitching initiative. Why are we receiving stories? So Climate Tracker is an organization that supports young journalists all over the world. We work almost all over the globe, and we yeah, and we try to encourage climate journalism in almost every region you can think of. So that's the main goal of the organization. And so as we are not separate from this with our in our publishing side, this is also taken. All of these are also taken into account into our pitching initiative. So we also have a special emphasis in developing countries. That also reflects on our stories. We're very interested in stories in climate journalism coming from developing countries. That doesn't mean that if you're in a developed country, you're not going to publish your story. Of course not. But it means that we're going to give special priority to stories coming in from developing countries. We're very interested in capacity building with our journalists and getting them to get something out of the process, right? So we don't want just to tell you go all by yourself and do whatever you like. But the intention of as it is the intention of the organization is for you to learn something in the process and to get more interested in climate journalism more than you probably already were if you're pitching as a story. So to put this initiative in context, previously we worked with a fellowship called the Media Mentor Fellowship. And what we did was we selected 12 fellows from all over the world. We had some excellent fellows, and they, since the start of this year, have been producing one article a month during 3 months. And then 6 of them were selected to move on to the next phase, where they did one collaborative story among themselves and then one investigative piece. So as you see, we almost, when you have 12 fellows and all of them are writing one article a month, you have, 12 articles, and it's almost like having a staff writer, right? So all of our content came mainly from this initiative. But this fellowship ended very recently. We're already publishing the final pieces. If you check them on the website, you'll see that we'll be publishing the final investigative piece from our fellows. And we decided to move on to more of an open opportunity for freelancers to send us their pitches for stories and then publish their stories. So as I told you, the idea for the pitching initiative is to sort of continue with the values of the organization and to support journalists from all over the world, especially with a clear emphasis on developing countries. We want to support especially young and early career journalists. Maybe it has happened to a few of you guys, but we have a limited amount of stories that we can allocate each month. And in some cases, we have to give priority to those who are to those who send great stories but are in their early career. So the idea for us is to with this initiative in particular, is to support especially young journalists, get them interested in climate journalism, give them the tools also to understand what climate journalism is about, and yeah, what we try with this initiative is for it not to be, just the regular process in media, where most of the time you send a pitch, if you've been a freelancer like me, and then nobody answers probably. If you're rejected, you don't get any feedback. If you're selected, then probably you really don't know why. I mean, it's a very editorial and very closed sort of criteria. And what we want to do with this is get you guys to learn from the process, even if you're rejected. We've been trying to give you feedback to all of you guys. Um, maybe maybe what you might have seen is that it takes a bit. It's kind of a lengthier process as well, because we try to give feedback to everyone. Even if their pitch is rejected, we include a couple of paragraphs on why, and tips on how to not get rejected in the future. And so, yeah, what you might have seen is that probably of uh, instead of 3 days or two, as a regular media process would be, it's taking us from 5 to 7 days probably to answer to all of you. But the idea is for us to answer to all of you. And so if you feel like you haven't heard from me, just give it some time. Maybe after a week you can remind me, because it might happen that it gets lost in all of our emails. But yeah, don't think that we'll forget about you. The idea after your pitch is selected as well. If you get selected, the idea is for us to be able to give you some mentoring, and give you some tools on climate journalism that you can apply for your story. And then also for the editing process to be also very instructive. Because another thing that if you're a freelancer, another thing that you might have noticed is that sometimes changes are made to your story with no real explanation as to why they were made. And then you submit a story, and then they just give you something back for revision that it's completely different, and you don't get explained why those changes were made. So the idea of the editing process is to be also very instructive, and tell if we're gonna do a change to the text, we will tell you why we did those changes, and yeah, and justify just everything. When we say we also take into account permission, is pretty much the same thing that I've been telling you guys. We are prioritizing stories from developing countries and from early career journalists. Again, it doesn't mean that if you are mid-career or from a developed country, it doesn't mean that you'll that you won't be able to write for us. But it does mean that from the limited amount of stories, if there are many good stories from developing countries, it will be our priority to focus on. So some of you might have read our pitching guide. We have it up on our website, and if you haven't yet, we strongly encourage you to go to our website and take a look at it. It's on when you scroll down, you go to the very bottom of the site, and it says pitches a story, and there you can see our pitching guide. This is some of the guidelines that we included in that document. The idea is we're taking these 3 types of stories for the moment. This is what we're interested in. So if you have a pitch and you have a story in mind, make sure it can accommodate into one of these 3. It hasn't actually happened very often that somebody sent a pitch that wasn't any of these 3 types of stories, but I don't know, if you have like a Q&A interview, we will probably not be interested in it, because it's not what we're looking for right now. So to explain them for a bit, what we mean by a feature story is a story from the front line of the climate crisis. As you might have seen, we have a very diverse group of writers, and what we want to do is to make sure to publish stories that actually represent the diversity that we're getting, and that actually that show the local effects of this very global issue. So it's very important for us to have that link between the global climate change and very local impacts in your countries. So yeah, our feature stories often have a very are very emphasized also in how communities are dealing through climate change, how governments are dealing with climate change as well. We encourage you to take a look at climate policy from your country. Uh, it might be in energy policy, in fossil fuels, for example. It might be in conservation policy and how they are protecting or probably not protecting their forests. Um, but we strongly encourage you to take a look at climate policy, because it's one of the focuses uh, of our feature stories. Uh, we try to make stories that at least try to hold uh, people in power with some accountability for what's happening, um, especially in developing countries. They might not be taking this as seriously as it should be. And the idea for us, and the idea of the type of journalism that we want to encourage is for us to question why are there no actions in place in adaptation, for example, in a country that's very prone to drought, for example, and what are the measures in adaptation that are being placed to withstand that drought. Uh, the other type of stories we are taking are explainers and profiles. With explainers, we try to be we try to encourage you guys. We try to encourage you guys to take a look at maybe issues that are not really obvious and that haven't been already covered. Because we had received some ideas for an explainer on, I don't know, how climate change impacts agriculture. So that's a story that's been already covered. It's also not new. Remember, we're doing news content. Um, so we need to, when we uh, ask for an explainer, we want your story to give something innovative, something that hasn't been already covered. Maybe if you want to write on agriculture, maybe I don't know, climate change impacts in a specific crop or in a specific technological change. Uh, that's where the story and that's where the explainer might be. And the profile also, we have been receiving sort of pitches to do a profile on very local climate activists. Um, as you know, we are an international publication. We have an international audience, and in many cases, some of these very local activists are very similar in themselves. For example, they lead a reforesting campaign. They might lead uh, a school protest very similar to what Greta Thunberg is doing. So when you propose a profile, make sure to be very clear on what the human story is behind them. When we ask for a profile, we don't just want to tell what their work is, but also what the life of this person is, and why and what adversities has this person overcome. That is the type of story that we'd be more interested in. Uh, but we will hardly assign a story about a reforestation campaign, I don't know, in a rural area of your country, because there are many across the world, and these types of stories get to us uh, fairly on a fairly regular basis. Um, as you might see, we do from 800 to 1,000 words. That might vary a bit depending on your story. We do ask for at least 3 direct sources. So if you're sending your pitch, make sure to be very clear about what your sources are. And we ask for original photos, or if you have, or if maybe your story is not about. It's not something that you can document, and especially now with the COVID crisis. Um, at least make sure to send some open source photos. So those are some of the requirements. Uh, we have some suggestions as well as where this also comes in our pitching guide, but maybe if you haven't read it, we strongly suggest, as I mentioned before, to look at climate policy from your country. That's why this and started this webinar asking you what's your country's emissions reduction goal. That's something that's like very basic and that we all should know, but maybe take a look at more specific details on how that big goal will be accomplished. There might be stories there. In terms of energy, for example, is your country right now investing on renewables in the way it should be? Is that investment actually being spent well, or is it being spent, for example, in I don't know, removing indigenous people from their land, or cleaner forests for a hydropower plants, or you know, that's where these stories might be. So yeah, that's our suggestion, is to look very carefully at climate policy from your country. Climate impacts, make sure you're very, 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 very sure that they're related to climate change, because we also get a lot of stories that that talk about, for example, a water crisis in a certain community. But when you keep asking some questions, you realize, well, the drought and the water crisis from that particular situation wasn't really that much related to climate change as much as it was related to I don't know, overuse of water, or bad management. But in general, with climate impacts, try to make sure that we're talking about uh, we're talking about an issue related with the global phenomenon of climate change. Remember that we have an international audience, and we are looking for your stories to have that international link to the global phenomenon. We also strongly suggest to look at stories of climate policy related to the COVID-19 pandemic, such as stimulus packages that have been approved in many countries. How much investment of that stimulus, for example, is going to renewables? How much is still going to fossil fuels? Yeah, and how much is going to climate adaptation, for example, in your country? Those are the type of questions that might lead to a story that we might take. With climate solutions as well, try to make sure that that we are not also not covering only depressing stories, as climate change might be a very depressing issue if you've been covering it for a while, like me. So we also try to assign some stories on initiatives that have proven solutions to the climate crisis. I'll give you in the next slides, we'll give you a few more tips on how to cover climate solution stories. And we wanted to share also some of the most common mistakes that we've been receiving. I shared with you some of them already, but maybe this will make it more clear. If you sent a pitch, you probably or you might have committed one of these mistakes, but maybe you didn't see the other common mistakes that we've been receiving. So so make sure to take a look at this. One of the most common mistakes is that we've received stories that are not really stories. We've received a lot of topics a lot of very broad topics that people want to write about. And so I don't know, we've received pitches that say, I want to look at the impacts of climate change in agriculture in Lagos. Well, that's a topic, that's not a story, right? What a story might be is how those impacts are manifesting. Or what is the news there? What is the current issue that's related to the impacts of climate change in that country, right? So what we recommend is trying to focus on a specific case, a specific climate policy that's currently being passed or being discussed in your country, a specific event, uh, trying to be very specific and making sure that it's a current event, because sometimes, because we also have received stories about specific events that happened in 2019 or 2020, and those are not news already. Some stories we have received are not strongly related to climate change. So as I mentioned before, try to make sure that if you're proposing a story, for example, about plastics, it has a strong relation to carbon emissions from plastics, and it's focused on the emission side of plastics rather than the waste side of plastics, because that's a huge global problem, but it's not what we're covering right now from Climate Track. Yeah, this is just an example of what I was mentioning. A story, for example, is the impacts of climate change in this lake in Burundi. This is actually a story, a pitch that we received, and it's it has this problem that I mentioned, that it was a topic, but it wasn't a story. What might be a story, for example, is if you take a look at a specific sector, for example, fisheries, and you analyze, well, how did climate change affected this specific sector? And you take a look at the data, and then you realize, oh, fisheries in Burundi dropped by 40% in 2020 due to the drought in Lake Tanganyika. That might be a story for us. It's obviously fictional. I didn't analyze the data from fisheries in Burundi, but it's the type of story that would be interested, and also the type of approach that we're interested to your stories. This is what I mentioned. This is some of the tips that we've been giving to our writers about how to write about climate solutions. And it's important to keep these 4 things in mind, because some of you have sent a really good pitch, but then the initiative in itself it doesn't work for us. So for example, make sure that at least preliminary we have some results on how this initiative has actually helped to reduce emissions, or to adapt, or how has it supported adaptation in your country. Because some of these that you have sent us are like a great idea, but with no results proven. So we're trying to publish the initiatives that have shown that they work, especially if they have numbers backing them up. At least preliminary, I know that some initiatives are fairly new and won't have a global study behind them, but maybe try to look for at least some numbers on the initiative and some at least preliminary results. Also, try to make sure the initiative is scalable, because we're not trying to run very local, very specific climate initiatives for international audience. but rather we'd like to shine a light on initiatives that have have results and have proven that they work at a local level, but that they can grow to a national level and serve as example for other countries, for example. So make sure that that initiative is scalable. Uh, Make sure it has a global problem trying to be solved. And I included this because some of these initiatives are not meant to address climate change. Um, for example, we get a lot of recycling stories, for example, and depending on the focus of that story, it might not necessarily be very much related to climate change. So make sure that that you have very clear on that you're very clear on what the global problem that it's trying to solve, uh, and also make sure to include what challenges does this initiative has, because no solution is perfect. If we had a perfect solution to the climate and biodiversity crisis, we would have implemented it by now. Uh, but some of the pitches are maybe too optimistic on these initiatives, and maybe don't focus that much on what challenges does it have. Is it really feasible that it can grow? Is it really feasible that, I don't know, if it's an initiative to help agriculture workers adapt, is it feasible that they can understand that initiative? Is it feasible that they can pay for that in their farms? So those are the type of questions that we should also be including, trying to question a bit the solution in itself. Some other mistakes that we have been receiving, some stories, also that's very related to the first point in which a topic is not a story, but we have been also receiving stories, as I mentioned, that happened some time ago. So make sure the story that you're proposing either is um, either is current, is happening, from a current event, or it adds new information that hasn't been covered before. So the example I gave about the Lake Burundi, I gave it with numbers of 2020. But that might be a story that hasn't been covered, and it's adding new information to the media landscape, and that's what we want to do. Other stories are not. Uh, we don't want to disencourage local, a local angle to your story, because that's the main reason why we're doing a pitching initiative, and it's to really have a good sense of the diversity of each country. Uh, but we do need the story to have a link or a clear relation to the big picture of climate change. That might be through climate policy, for example. How does that story relate, for example, to carbon markets, or to an article in the Paris Agreement, or to your country's emission targets? But we do need to make sure the story has some link to the global issue and to the global policy that's trying to address climate change. I'm sorry, you probably can't read there, but it says good practices. So we also want to share some tips on how you can bulletproof your pitch. Um, So try to keep it short. I know some stories are very complex, and it's hard to synthesize them in a very short pitch. But take into account that we're reading hundreds of pitches, literally, and sometimes it might not be easy to read, you know, a 800-word pitch that's almost like the story, that's almost the same length of the story. So make sure your pitch is simple, it's short, and it's easy to read. because that will probably make it easier for me to digest what the essence of this story is. If you send a very long pitch with very complex paragraphs and that's not getting to the point, it's going to be harder for me to grasp, or it might be more easy for me to not understand what's going on with your pitch. So that's something that you should take into account, not only with us but also in general when you're pitching. Try to make yeah, try to make it short and to the point. Also try to make your data, your sources very clear. Some of you maybe send a pitch and then you tell us we want to interview government officials. But what we're more interested in is you telling us, I want to interview, I don't know, John from the Department of Forestry of the Ministry of Environment. So that very specific person, that works a lot more for us because we know you have a more clear sense of what you want to do. Also, another good idea that, again, it's not, it doesn't work only with us, but in general, is to read our website and read the previous stories that we've been doing. Because what we want to assign is very similar to what we already did with the media mentorship fellows and also with our past freelance stories. It might be important for you if you have some of your stories are like are of your own agenda, right? So you see, I don't know, an event in the news, and then you ask how might this affect local communities in your country. So I don't know if, for example, Japan decides to stop all of coal spending, then you might ask the question of how does that affect communities in my country that are dependent on coal. So try to, when you're doing that type of story, try to gather some initial evidence, at least for me to see that you're not doing a hypothesis out of the blue. So it's very necessary that you at least show some evidence that that this story will make sense and you will find something, because those are a bit more risky since it might or it might not be. So try to yeah, in general for all of your stories to have some initial evidence. Also, well, yeah, like I was saying, make sure that your story has a very clear link to climate change. And we also wanted to share with you guys some of the stories that that we have been receiving that we thought were good pitches, and we assigned them. So this is what Marina's pitch looks like. I don't expect you to read it if you can't, but just for you to get a clear sense of why this pitch was good. She went to the point straight up. She included a very attractive title from the context of what's going on. So Joe Biden held this summit in the United States with a lot of presidents from all over the world, and they committed to or they pledged to make some actions on climate change. One of the persons that was invited to this summit was Brazil's president, who has been widely criticized for not acting enough on climate change. And so the story is from this current event in which the Brazil's president committed to action on climate change, and how in just a few weeks he did exactly the opposite. So that's a story that takes something that's current and that's still fresh in the media landscape, and it gives its local angle and its local twist. So there's a very clear link. Those are the types of methods or the types of stories that you might be interested in. Also take a look at how short the pitch is. That also helps me to know that she has the idea and the sense of what's new in that pitch, because she can synthesize it a lot and still not lose the story. Uh, so the one of the things that I look for is that if it's short, you can tell in a very few sentences what the news is from your story. Um, and that really gives me confidence in that you will be able to write the story, because we can see that you have a very clear sense of what you want to do.
All right. Hi, sorry to cut you off, Sebas. Is it possible to wrap up in 2 minutes?
Yeah. I'm on the final.
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
Cool.
I guess I talked too much. This is the way she presented her sources, as I was saying. A very clear person with a very clear job description. I also wanted to share with you some of these other stories that we've been assigning, and also for you to see the diversity of the places that we're assigning. So we're also taking that into account. So it might happen that, for example, we have too many stories from a certain region, and we might need some stories from other regions. So it might happen that your pitch is good, it works for us, but maybe we need to keep um, that diversity and that representation of all of our different regions. So these are some of the other stories that we received. And then we have some more suggestions on stories that we might take. Some of them we already discussed. Take a look at how carbon markets are changing the forest landscape in your country, for example, or how this year's climate negotiations in the UN will be very different, since COVID-19 will be a factor at play. So some countries, for example, are negotiating vaccines or health support in exchange for their climate action. So that might be a story that we're interested in. And also, well, as I mentioned, green recovery and stimulus spending on renewables. Those are the types of stories that we will prioritize for the moment. So yeah, we can. I'm sorry. We can carry on with the rest. If you have also any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Sebastian. And I know we saw a lot of questions coming in our chat section, but now we would like to take some questions live as well. So I know there's a question here from Ayaz Khan from Pakistan. Ayaz, you can unmute and ask your question.
Okay. Hi everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for such informative session, Sebastian. My question is that as I'm in Pakistan and there are some climate issues, and the area where I live in is actually an area where a lot of just events have happened recently, and one of them is that once there is a refining that company, and that there was a drastic spillover in the ocean where I live, close to Arabian Sea. But the problem is now its impact is high in my country, but I don't know how to connect it to globally. But it is a high risk and it is a very high profile story in the area. But impact is low in overall global that. So how can I do a story for climate tracker on this issue? So I'm unable to just understand this. It has impact, and that has and been covered by a lot of people and a lot of media organizations, and maybe, but it's not that much highlighted. It's the news, so I don't know will it make some impact for the global tracker organization or not. Such issues are present in Pakistan, and most of the cases, either officials do not want to just go with the stories and let them go in international media organizations. But here, when we say that, make sure that it has a global impact, somehow it is linked with a global that phenomena. That is what I miss it, and I'm unable to understand this. How to cope with this issue? Can you please reflect on this? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ayaz. So your story, from what you're telling me, is very much related to the global issue of fossil fuels, uh, and how some of these, and how managing some of these fossil fuels might be, um, might be of high risk to ecosystems. So I think that there is a very clear global link to that. Another thing that would be interested from that story, for example, is for you to look at the perspective of local communities in Pakistan, and how are they being affected from this oil spill. Um, yeah, so my suggestion would be to link it to fossil fuels and to other related oil spills, as this is of I think of very high interest globally. I'm sorry, any other questions coming in?
I have a question.
Yes, please ask your question. Go right ahead.
Uh, Sebastian, you keep on speaking about the issue of prioritizing or deeply focusing on local issues. And if I've heard you right, it's like you're discouraging, but my interest will be now in a context now, like in Kenya, there are so many activities being done, especially by people from the rural areas that are definitely meant to contribute to the set target by the country. So from your presentation, is it not encouraged to focus on the contribution of people from what low levels? Because for me, how I see it, the conversation on climate change has mainly been done now, at least I can speak from my country at a high level. And from my opinion, I feel like there's so much being done at a lower level that needs to come to light. And that is what I focused on my pitch. Are you saying that that's not what you're going for or what you were looking for?
Thanks for the question. Not at all. I mean, it's quite the opposite. We are looking for very local, uh, very grassroots initiatives, but we ask for certain conditions, in which they have already, they are already at a stage where they can prove that they work. So, for example, even if, I don't know, one initiative is reforesting in coffee farms, for example, and then one coffee farm is imposing this. That's not really a story for us. But then if the whole community, if all of the coffee farms in a certain community are starting to reforest, and that's helping, and that's showing clear effects, for example, on the people and the way they manage their farms, or the way, and it has a very clear potential for scaling. For example, if there are a lot of coffee farms that are not doing reforestation in the rest of the country, that might be a story. So we are definitely encouraging local initiatives and very grassroots initiatives, uh, just making sure that they're already at a stage where we can cover them, and they're not maybe in too early stages where they already haven't been able to implement the initiative for as long as we would like.
Thank you. And I have another question kindly. Now that you have explained what the Climate Tracker organization was specifically looking for in the pitches, do the applicants have an opportunity to go back to their application and adjust their pitches, or where are we?
If you mean if you already sent your pitch?
Yes, if you already sent your pitch.
Yeah, I mean, if you sent your pitch and it won't work for us, I'll probably take a look and reject it if it doesn't work for us. But what you can do, and what is highly encouraged, is for you to take our tips and then make the story more in a way that's gonna interest us, or find a new angle to your story, or because maybe the exact same pitch, if you sent it twice, it won't work either. I mean, it's the same pitch, but if you grab your story and find the new angle that from one of the tips that we've been sharing with you guys, then that might be of interest for us. And it's definitely the case for a lot of stories that we've been receiving, that they could have a very strong potential if they had like a little bit of an adjustment on the angle or the focus of the story. So yeah, we highly encourage you to at least keep sending us pitches, because maybe one of them won't work, but you don't know the rest. We might end up taking one of your stories. So yeah, we strongly suggest you to keep pitching.
All right, thank you so much for those questions, guys. So now I'm going to pass you on to Chris Wright, who's gonna take over the next session. We're gonna do a breakout session, and Chris will explain. So Chris, you can take it away.
Hi. So we're going to now try to take some of these questions, try to take what Sebas presented into smaller breakout groups. And in these breakout groups, you'll have one member of Climate Tracker there. So we won't break out into tiny little groups, but we will basically try to use this as a 5 to 10 minute brainstorming session where we can brainstorm different ideas about climate stories. So this will be a chance for you to potentially mention some of the ideas you're thinking about or some of the concerns you have, and then brainstorm it as a smaller group. Obviously, we've got 60 people here, so it's a little bit challenging to get your time to ask your question. So we're going to break into slightly smaller groups, and Dezanne's going to break them there. And we're going to have 5 to 10 minutes to try to discuss different story ideas that we have and to try to maybe work on them as either a singular or collaborative idea. Now, the background of this is, as you know, Sebas accepts pitches each month, and we have kind of maxed out our story submission process for June. But because of this community hangout, we are going to award another story that is pitched in the next 24 hours. But the only caveat is that it has to be pitched as a collaborative story. So that means that it needs to be pitched as a story from at least 2 different journalists, and it can be up to as many journalists as you want. So hopefully in these breakout groups you get some ideas. Maybe you want to share that idea with someone else and come up with a pitch and try to submit it before the end of the day tomorrow. And we'll review all of those pitches and give you feedback regardless. And at least one of those pitches will be picked up tomorrow and awarded our regular kind of €150 story grant for that story. So that's kind of the background of these breakout groups. I'm not saying you have to find a team member or team members in these breakout groups right now, but I just thought it might be an opportunity for us to brainstorm any ideas that we might have and to ask any further questions that you might have. So Dizan, have you been able to set up these breakout groups and you're going to magically transform this whole call?
Yeah, so you'll be joining those groups now. All right, we still have some people joining. All right, welcome back, everyone, and I hope that your breakout chat was interesting. Ours certainly was. So what we're gonna do is, yeah, what we're gonna do is just have one person from each group present what their pitch was, and so for instance, my group we had 5 different pitches, and then we voted on one. So Adua, you can go ahead and present your pitch to the rest of us.
Hello, everyone. I am Adra from Ghana. I pitched a story on what different countries are doing to mitigate climate change, and I cited an example from Ghana, where a project dubbed the Green Ghana Project was introduced in my country with the aim of planting 5 million trees to help mitigate climate change impacts. But these trees were planted barely a week ago. So for me, I was looking at, so how far have we gone? It's been barely a week, but should we go back to these trees that were planted? We realized that even the seeds that we're giving out, or these plants that we're giving out, most of them did not even plant them, or some did not even follow up on these things that they have done, the planting. Some did not check how far the growth process have been, and they ended up losing it. So at the end of the day, if our target is 5 million trees and we actually give out 5 million plants or seedlings, we may end up getting about 2 million, which means that it is important that we do a follow-up on most of the things that we have done to continue to find out the progress that we are making. I don't know if there's anything you would want to add to it.
No, great job, Adua. Thank you so much. And let's hear from Sebastian's group.
Maybe Janine, do you want to tell some of the stories that we talked about?
Well, thank you. I would prefer to give the speak to my partner. Then what's of the meeting?
Okay, then we can change. Maybe Ayaz wants to.
Yes, sir. I'm here. The story I just discussed with you, that I should reflect on that. The pitch was that as we can go for a collaborative story on beef consumption attitudes, as it is drastically contributing to increase in CO2 as well. And that's also part of now climate change strategy. Like we have gone through I have personally gone through some research papers on this, as like US, their government is working on, and they are changing the minds in beef consumption to just reduce beef consumption. So according to that research, so I want to just look at this in the government policies, that they have a lot of they have set up a lot of goals and on towards reforestation and a lot of things, but whether they are also thinking about from this angle as well or not, as livestock breeding is one of the basic components here in Pakistan, or we can say in India, and beef consumption might be high here. So how is this contributing to climate issue, and are we taking it serious or not, or this is missing from the government policies? So I'll reflect on this and I discuss this with Sarah as well. Thank you.
All right. What about let's see, Chris's group? Who will be presenting from Chris's group?
Well, Ava, go ahead. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but that's great.
No problem. So firstly, I got quite excited listening to what Ayaz just spoke about. So in our group, we talked about that as an alternative to meat, we now have cultured meat, and cultured meat is moving from the lab to commercial production. And so, this is a good time to sort of revisit what is the environmental promise of cultured meat. And some of the new data is suggesting that certainly there is environmental benefit to it, but maybe meat raised by regenerative farming may just have even a better carbon footprint, maybe even a negative carbon footprint. So it's pitching the choice between these two. And, from the US perspective, cultured meat is like this great alternative against CAFOs. But of course, in cultured meat is going to be everywhere. It's going to be produced in every continent. And so for me, one of the other things in discussing with the group was in different contexts and in different countries, how will cultured meat and regenerative farming play up against each other? And so Wisdom, who's from Nigeria, was also very interested, and he was sort of giving his perspective on what's happening with cultured meat, with the different farming practices. And also, what Wisdom, actually, do you want to just join in and talk about the situation with Nigeria? And I don't know. Anyway, so Wisdom and we decided that we should talk to each other and see if there is an interesting story there where, we can talk about, what environmentally responsible meat eating might be in Africa versus maybe, in some other part of the world. So.
Thank you so much, Abha. That sounds like a really interesting story. And let's see if the other group can give you guys competition. So Patricia is telling me that Juan from her group will be telling us their pitch. So Juan, you can take it away.
Juan, you're on mute, but it looks like you're saying something very serious.
Sorry, guys. Pardon. No, I was saying that I'm living in the UK at the moment. And yesterday, the Committee for Climate Change released the third report on climate change risk assessment or something like that. A point that it mentions is that the UK is not prepared to face all the challenge that climate change is bringing us. And a tiny detail that they say very, very briefly is about peatlands. Peatlands is an ecosystem quite common on Scotland and in the north of the island that naturally it is wet, it has an amount of water, plus many grass that thousands of years behind has been put on the bed. So naturally is a sink, a store of carbon. The thing that happened is that because the animal agriculture and climate change, those peatlands are getting drier. And when it gets drier, the carbon stored inside going to the atmosphere. So because the human action, we have changed what naturally is a carbon store in a carbon emission. And I think that is quite interesting. Like sources to consult on that, to ask about that, it is obviously the British government, the Scotland government, many organizations that are interested in the area on that topic. Obviously, the Committee of Climate Change, because actually it's an independent body that is not, is an advisor for the government, but they are not the government. So they are, I don't know, I think that it was 400 scientists or something like that. And I think that it will be, they will be keen on talk with journalists and trying to spread the word. And from that, we can get many angles. See, from something scientific in the emission of carbon in the atmosphere, something about diet and the human habit, like animal agriculture, something like reforestation, So it has many angles to approach, and I think that is an interesting point. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think they all sound like great stories, and they all have great potential to be selected. What we would encourage you to do, all of you, is that you submit these stories as a pitch. Maybe you can, I don't know, maybe you can choose among yourselves a person to submit the story or the idea, or maybe you, if you want, you can also get together and talk some more about it. But yeah, I'd encourage you to submit it as a in the form that some of you that I sent some of you, where you submit your pitches. If you don't have the form, you can just send me an email and ask for it, and I'll send it to you. That's where we receive all of the pitches. So you can, yeah, Dizan shared my email with you guys. So if you want to submit your pitch from some of these collaborative ideas, just go ahead and do it today, and you might get assigned for a story.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, and thank you to each and every one of you who presented your pitches. Some really interesting stories that I'd very much like to learn more about. So next up, we have Patricia, who is our media research manager. She's from the Philippines. And Patricia is going to talk to us a little bit about media analysis work that she's been working on. And Patricia, you can take it away right away.
Thanks, Suzanne. Hi, everyone. I've met some of you already through the breakout group, so hi again. So I'll be discussing in a very brief period the media research I've been conducting with other researchers from Southeast Asia the past few months. So I'll just this is gonna be very brief. So I'll just give the basics, and I'll just give you a sneak peek of what we found so far. I know that some of you might be interested in research, so you can also watch out for media research opportunities with Climate Tracker. Just follow us on social media and just keep an eye out for these postings. So I'll just share my screen, but I'll have to turn off my video to conserve bandwidth. But yeah. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see your screen, Patricia.
Okay. So yeah, these are just the basics. So our media research process at Climate Tracker, so it involves these 4 phases. So just to give you guys a bit of a background, so I used to be a media research fellow last year from November to December. So this was something I was already familiar with before I was leading this project with Break Free from Plastic. So it has 4 phases. I won't go into detail into each one right now because we have limited time, and it will entail several training sessions just to get the get the details of each one. But I'll just give you an overview. So article sampling, this is where it all starts. So for this project, so we've been looking at how plastics have been covered in Southeast Asian media. So 5 countries, so Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. I know there are more Southeast Asian countries, but for this project, it's 5 countries. So what we did was we decided on some relevant keywords. For this project, we decided to make them broad enough. So for example, plastics, sachets, plastic pollution, just to extract the most articles we could get from these different publications. And we also decided to get as many publications as possible from each country. So we looked at 3 mainstream outlets, 2 regional publications, and 1 specialized or niche publication, which can be a magazine or something that specializes in the environment or even business, for example, just to look at different perspectives all over the country. Then when we did that, like we subjected them to a content analysis. So this is really just like looking at each article using different parameters. So for example, how many sources are used? Does this article mention the pandemic? Because I'm sure we've all noticed that the pandemic has led to an increase in plastic waste. So like that's something we also looked at. And framing analysis, I'll actually like give you a brief exercise on this in a bit. And then after that, we also interviewed like at least 8 journalists from each of our countries just to like learn more about how like these narrative frames were like shaped by the media in these different countries. So we found a lot of similarities between countries, but we also saw some like interesting differences like across the region. So let's look at it more closely. So when I was like conducting the training with the other researchers, so this is what I gave them as an example. So it's not climate related, but I thought this example like shows how like one story can be presented in several ways. So like maybe you can just like skim through like these different stories right now. You don't have to read the entire thing, but just to give you an overview. So this is like a story about like an infant that was bitten by rats. But you can see like these 3 stories present this issue in like very different ways. So for example, the first one. So if you take a look, it actually puts the blame on the mom if you like read it closely. So it kind of implies that the mom was like the one at fault for this incident. The second one, if you take a look at it, it's framed in a way that kind of shows that it's like a spat between like a landlord and a tenant. So you can see this through the quotes. So here, I spend half my time cleaning up after them. So this is the landlord complaining about the tenants. So I guess that's one tip I can give for like framing analysis. Just like looking at like who is being quoted, who's like being given like the chance to like present their perspective and whose views are excluded. So I think that's one thing you can look at when you like read the news. I think this is something you can also do like regularly, even when you read the news every day. You can develop that as a habit, and I think that way you'll get like a richer understanding of how like these stories are presented. And then the last one is very different from like the first 2. So this story, it presents it as a public health story. So we can see here that a pediatrician was quoted, and it doesn't put blame on the mom or like the tenants in this case. So it kind of like presents this story as like a bigger public health issue. So it places it in that context. So yeah, health officials, and it says here that the neighborhood has been called the zone of death. So it's kind of like implying, not really implying, it's actually stating that this issue is not just like limited to this baby. So like a lot of like other neighbors can also be affected because of the neglect like experienced by this particular neighborhood. So I'll let you guys like just like read it for like a few more seconds just so you have an idea too. But like you can like unmute yourself if you want to comment on anything. Feel free. I'll move on to like just like an overview of like the research topic we've
Patricia?
these story frames aren't always that explicit. Sometimes you have to like really closely read an article to make sure that you know how it's being presented. And I think like reporters themselves sometimes they're not even aware of how these stories are being presented. So I think a lot of these like narrative frames are also a product of like newsroom practices. So like the style they've been used to, for example. And if you're looking at something like a business newspaper, even if it's a climate story, for sure there will always be like a profit motive involved. So that's like something you can like take into consideration when you like conduct a framing analysis. And I also want to say that there's no such thing as like a completely objective frame. So I'm not saying there's like one correct way to like present a certain issue. But it's really just interesting to see. Oh, sorry. It's really just interesting to see how like a story can like use like different rhetorical devices, metaphors to like present an issue. So I'm sure like you got a lot of helpful tips from Sebas earlier. So I wanted to like kind of make this interactive and ask you, so like this, since this is the project we've been working on for like the last few months, and like I think on the surface, like not a lot of people might be familiar with like the link between plastics and climate change. So I wanted to ask if you guys could share what your thoughts are on this. Yeah, just feel free to unmute yourself. Anyone?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I feel there's a whole lot of link between plastics and climate change, which comes from the perspective of land degradation. Okay.
Yes.
And in land degradation, it leads to scarcity of land, and also it also leads to conflict as well. So that is I just want to make it brief, and that is what I feel. And apart from that, too, it's also affect the waterways, okay, affecting the aquatic species in the water, which could even lead to death of a whole lot of species, making their food, killing their foods, which is seafood, also making seafood unavailable as well. There's a whole lot of synonymous relationship between plastic and climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. Anyone else who wants to share their thoughts?
Yes. Hello. Hello. Oh, hello. Okay. I'm Wisdom Omelu from Nigeria. I think the major link between plastic and climate change is its effect when it is actually burnt, because you see sometimes the.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you anymore.
End up hello.
Hello, there. You're back.
Okay, so when they are burnt, the smoke and all that go to the atmosphere, which end up changing the dynamics of the processes of the atmosphere. So that's what I think.
Thank you. Yeah, like some of those are actually like some of the frames we found during like this research project. So I'll also just like proceed with like just like an overview of the findings so far. So since we're focusing on Southeast Asia for this project, so like maybe these are like some facts you didn't know yet. So Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, these are actually 4 of the countries that produce all of the world's plastic waste that end up in the sea and they harm marine life. And then like just linking it to like the climate crisis, just like keeping in mind what Sebas said earlier, because like you always have to link it to climate. But in Southeast Asia, for example, there's a tendency to like really focus on like plastic waste and not really putting it in the context of like climate change. So just like putting it out there. But like over 99% of plastics are actually made from fossil fuels. So they result in like a lot of greenhouse gas emissions at every phase of their life cycle. So like a few of the articles we looked at did emphasize this, but so far it wasn't really like a very prominent theme. So a lot of the articles still like emphasize plastic waste and didn't really, for example, look at the bigger picture. And this is like data from the World Economic Forum. So 20% of oil consumption will be traced back to plastics by 2050. So like I think like this kind of link is something that's not really like seen a lot in the media. I see it a lot in research, but I don't really see it a lot covered in media. So I guess that's also something you can keep in mind when you pitch your stories, just always making sure that you make the link back to climate change. And I'll just like give you like a sneak peek of the findings. So like the report hasn't been published, but these are like some of the things we found. So like single-use plastics, they were framed largely negatively in Southeast Asia. We also wanted to take a look at whether the pandemic has led to like a shift in the discourse. We didn't really find that. Although when like COVID was mentioned, like it was always stated that like COVID has led to an increase in plastics because of like people staying at home and like ordering more food online. So more food means like more plastic packaging, for example. So there's been an increase in plastic waste during the pandemic. A lot of these articles, like they mention like specific policies, like usually plastic bans that are implemented locally in Southeast Asia. But we noticed that they didn't really like delve deeper into like the ramifications of these like policies. So usually there were like restatements of like official statements or what's already found on the website. So there wasn't like much in-depth investigation on these. So an interesting thing, I'm not sure if you're like familiar with the Philippines, but if you are like I'm sure you'll know that the Philippines has like a very strong civil society space. So we found it interesting that the Philippines, for example, they usually quoted environmental nonprofits when reporters were like reporting on like the plastic like so-called pandemic here in Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, like Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, they usually relied on government sources. In the case of Vietnam, since Vietnam, like all media there is like state-owned, this wasn't much of a surprise, but we just thought it was like interesting to point out here. And like again, I think this is like a very common frame. Sorry about that typo, but plastic waste was usually like framed as a threat to marine biodiversity, and sometimes it was also framed negatively when it comes to like public health. And like something we didn't really see a lot is like plastic producers getting the blame for like the increase in plastics, especially during the pandemic. So there was like a lot of focus on like individual responsibility, like are you recycling the plastics? But we felt like not enough journalists were asking about whether like the plastic companies are actually doing their part to like reduce their like so-called like plastic footprint. So and in Malaysia, because like a lot of like plastics were being imported into this country when China like banned all plastic waste imports. It was kind of framed as something as a national humiliation for them. So that was something interesting that we found. And these are just like some other findings. So you'll find more of these when we publish the report in the coming weeks. And I guess like something I should also highlight from the Philippines, like some journalists thought that they couldn't really write about like corporations' role in like producing plastics, at least like not critically, because like a lot, if not all, publications here are like profit driven. So they felt like these articles wouldn't be published in the first place because they would lead to a loss of advertising revenues. So that's really it. If you want to learn more about this report or like other like media research opportunities, for example, that's how I really started at Climate Tracker. You can just like check out the social media, and when the report is published, you can email me to like maybe get a link or like just ask me some questions about it. So that's it. I hope you learned something. Like, let me know if you have any questions about it.
All right. Thank you so much, Patricia, for that awesome, those awesome tips and everything. And we're gonna make sure that we make these presentations available. And as we've mentioned before as well, this video, this call is being live streamed on YouTube, so it's going to be available there for you as well. And I'm going to pass it on now to Chris to wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Suzanne, and thanks everyone for joining. I think we had a peak of about 70 people on the call at one point, and 33 of you have stuck around until now. So thank you so much. This has been a trial for us. We haven't done a community hangout before. And as you can see, Dizan is dressed up for it. So you're all kind of, privileged because of that. But I really enjoyed it. And I want to do this every month so that we get a chance to kind of connect with you, share some of the things that we're thinking about, but also hear more from you. And I think that in the future, we'll have a lot more focus on the type of breakout groups, brainstorming thoughts about our programs, about what we do well, what we don't do well, what we could do better, and how we can kind of be a better support to all of you and create a better community. So I really want this to kind of continue, and I really I thank Patricia and Sebastian for presenting today, but I really hope that in the future we can kind of have most of our community hangouts come from you all, from our community. Going forward, obviously a lot of you are involved with Climate Tracker because of some of the opportunities that we can create, and because of some of the opportunities that are not just pitching. So you heard about Sebas and the opportunity to pitch stories to Climate Tracker. And that's something that is obviously an opportunity that you can, any day of the week that you think of an idea for a story, you can send that story in and we'll give you some feedback on it. Most publications will just reject your emails or will just kind of not even respond, but we'll give you some feedback at least. And I think that the other side of things, though, is a lot of you are interested in our fellowships. And I did just want to give you a small insight into some of the fellowships that we have at the moment, and some of the fellowships that we have going forward. And, one of the things that we've launched just this week is the Solutions Stories Fellowship. And I think that's one of our, for me, that's a really interesting opportunity. So Dizan, can you share the link in the chat now while I just kind of talk about it? Effectively, what we're going to be able to do is look for about, look for a small group of journalists from around the world. And you'll see there that there are some preference regions, but it's really just anywhere from around the world is eligible. And we're looking for journalists who are interested in effectively identifying local solutions that are happening in their country or in their region, and local kind of organizations or projects or programs or ideas that just haven't got a lot of big support, international support yet. And the writers in this fellowship will be writing about these projects and NGOs and ideas in a way, trying to highlight, the opportunity that exists there. And they'll be writing about them in a way that will be published on quite a big philanthropic publication that has every intention of trying to effectively get these stories published. It's not only get these stories published, total mind blank, but to try to use their contacts to see if there are other philanthropic organizations that can maybe support these projects and ideas and organizations. And I know that many of you are from places where, as you know, there are amazing people doing incredible things. And the one thing that they lack is the greenbacks, is a little bit of capital support to try and get their ideas off the ground. Or there are incredible projects that are underfunded and really need more support. So this is a great opportunity for people who do have insights into these types of projects and do have ideas about projects that are kind of being overlooked at the moment around the world. So that's an opportunity that I hope people are excited about. And that's kind of the only opportunity we have right now that is brand new. And I think that opportunity runs for the next 4 weeks, right, Dizan? And Dizan, the challenge is to pitch one of those stories in your own region, right? Pitch an idea of an organization or a project or a program that is kind of having a really positive impact, but really needs some more publicity, really needs some more, focus on it. Have I misrepresented that in any way, Diz?
Oh, that's accurate. So we're really looking to
Accurate,
get
thank you.
some. We're really looking to get some stories from on the ground. Projects, initiatives that are solution oriented from within your country, and give those initiatives some international spotlight, basically.
Great. And the other opportunity that hasn't gone out yet, that is kind of exclusive to this call, is one of the things we're focusing on doing is we're trying to build our mentor network, our network of experienced journalists and editors who can train early career journalists, who can train people who want to learn about journalism. And if some people on this call have said, I don't really know that much. I really want to get into it. I want to learn a little bit more. So we're looking for right now to build up a bigger community of mentors that we can kind of co-propose ideas with, that we can kind of think about creating projects with, and think about kind of hiring them to effectively mentor specific groups in specific regions around the world. So if you think that a lot of the stuff that Sebastian was presenting is stuff that you knew about already because you've been a journalist for 5-10 years already, and you have been covering environmental issues for a while, please reach out to me. My email is pretty easy to guess. It's chris@climatetracker.org. And let us know why you think you'd make a great mentor, because we are actively trying to build up this kind of mentoring group. And that's something that we will both be proposing projects with them, and also asking them to kind of think about project ideas with us that we can maybe turn into projects that they get hired to run. So they're the two opportunities I wanted to share with you for now. And otherwise, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for everyone who stuck around this long. And good luck. Like I said, we will within 24 hours, we will be selecting another pitch for those stories that get sent in. So from right now until the next 24 hours, if you submit a pitch to our pitching portfolio, we will select at least one of them. So you don't have to have a great pitch. You just have to have, the best pitch in the next 24 hours. So think about that. You've got a unique opportunity. You don't have to have the greatest story in the world. You just have to have the better one in the next 24 hours. And that could be you, or that could be your team. Like I said, we're looking for collaborative stories because we'd love to get more collaborative stories across the network. Back to you, Dizan.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to everyone who stayed with us for the past almost 2 hours. And I hope you've learned something new. You have a better idea, insight into the type of pitches that we're looking for. And I hope you all have a great day. And if you have any questions, you know how to contact me. I shared Sebastian's email as well. And I will be following up with you guys with all the resources that were shared in this call today as well. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your night.